visitors. In 1872, the United States, a country that had not yet seen its first centennial, established Yellowstone as the first national park in the world. President Ulysses S. Grant signed Yellowstone into existence, and a new concept was born. And with it, a new way for people to preserve and protect the best of what they had for the benefit and enjoyment of future generations. Yellowstone Lake is one of the largest high-altitude lakes in North America and is centered over the Yellowstone caldera, the largest supervolcano on the continent. In the southwest area of the lake, the West Thumb geothermal area is easily accessible to visitors. Geysers, fumaroles, and hot springs are found alongside and even in the lake. The federally funded Hayden Geological Survey of 1871 provided the most detailed and scientific descriptions of Lake Yellowstone in the pre-park era. The Hayden Party, 34 men in all, launched Annie, the first boat to sail on Yellowstone Lake, and began exploring the islands and shoreline. The first photographs of the lake were taken by William Henry Jackson, and paintings by Thomas Moran, along with the Geological Survey, played a prominent role in convincing the U.S. Congress to pass legislation creating Yellowstone Park. Yellowstone Lake is the foundation of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, the largest remaining nearly intact ecosystem in the Earth's northern temperate zone. It provides the key ingredients to a large and complex food chain that sustains many of the animals for which Yellowstone is so famous. In 1894, the Lacey Act was passed by Congress, giving full protection to wildlife in Yellowstone Park, with the exception of wolves and coyotes. This act paved the way for future wildlife and environmental movements. From the days of the Hayden expedition to the present, Yellowstone Lake continues to be a source of rich, diverse, and sometimes surprising information that is rare among the world's Great Lakes. Lake Yellowstone and Yellowstone National Park, in all its preserved glory, is like no other place on Earth, and must be seen and experienced to be believed and enjoyed.
From Yellowstone National Park, this is What We Do. I'm Ashton Hooker.
And I'm Miles Barger.
Hey, Miles.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Well, thanks for joining. We are joined today by Brett DeYoung.
Hello.
Thanks, Brett. Who is the park's supervisory telecommunications specialist here in Yellowstone. So to kind of kick us off with this conversation about telecommunications, cell towers, computers, all the techie stuff that can be a little polarizing here in a park like Yellowstone. People like, remote places without any connectivity. We're going to get into all that, but I have a little trivia for you first. So let's see. We're talking about data. This is a big park, a lot of employees, a lot of computers, a lot of storage. How much storage do you think is supported on Yellowstone's network? You have to take a wild guess.
I'll take a wild guess. 100 terabytes.
You are actually spot on.
Oh.
That's amazing.
I remember Mark's emails.
Good job. So to put that into perspective, I was like, what does 100 terabytes actually mean?
Mm-hmm.
So correct me if I'm wrong. This was just some brief Googling. So 300,000 digital photos require 1 terabyte. So if you multiply that by 100, that is 30 million photos. That's a ton.
That's a lot of photos.
That's a ton of data and storage.
Or 1 hour of 8K footage. Just kidding.
Yeah. That's probably
8K
not too
3D.
far off. Yeah. But anyway, to get into this topic more, we have Brett DeYoung. Thanks for joining us, Brett. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. So starting us off, where did you get your start in the National Park Service?
I started volunteering with the National Park Service. I came to Yellowstone right after graduating from Purdue, and I worked for the concessionaire, and I worked with the rangers at Old Faithful doing search and rescue and a number of other different things. Other jobs that I did for the concessionaire and risk management and fire safety. I worked with a fire marshal, and I worked with the safety office, and an engineering office. I worked with the facility maintenance division. So I knew most everybody pretty well after the 16 years that I'd worked for the concessionaire. And then one day I got a call from someone, and I applied for a job, and I walked across the street, and I asked them where the cafeteria was, because at the concessionaire they fed us every day, and they told me I had to bring my own lunch.
Oh,
Oh
bummer.
man.
So I'm still working through that.
Yeah, you're still learning how to,
But
feed yourself
2006
every
is when I
day.
came over.
Did you why did you first come out and start volunteering? Were you just an outdoors person before that, or?
Yeah, I came out here like most people do because they want to experience the outdoors and they want to live in it, and they want to, rather than taking a vacation, they want to walk out the door and do it on their time off. And so, I was just drawn to that. And it was a really close-knit community down at Old Faithful.
Mhm.
And we ended up working winters and summers seasonally. And, we all worked closely with the rangers. So it was just nice to spend time and broaden our sphere. So.
Mhm. And what was it? Was there something about Yellowstone that drew you here, or was it just kind of, you just happened to
Not
come out
much,
here?
really.
Yeah.
No. It was, I was graduating from college in 1989 at Purdue, and it was during a recession at the time, and I was gung-ho to start paying off student loans, and I had a friend that kept saying, I love, I've been working summers in Yellowstone, and you should come out. And I said, okay, let's come out for a summer. And I think you hear that story a lot.
Yep.
People get
Yeah.
hooked.
Got hooked.
So, yeah. And my wife came out eventually, not long after that, and we just made a home of it.
Cool.
It's such a big park, and there's so many opportunities. You can move all over the place laterally, and there's a lot to do here. That's a benefit of a great big park.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So as a supervisory telecommunications specialist, do you have a typical day on the job? Is there even such a thing? Does it vary by season? What does that look like for you?
Most days are typical. When you get into a supervisory position, you don't get out in the park as much, so there's a lot of office time, which is can be the downside. The upside is that you work with you have a staff, and they become your team, and that's fun too. And you kind of live through them in a lot of ways. But a typical day, we support Yellowstone's dispatch center, which is an 8-position dispatch center. It's FCC licensed. And it's an alarm monitoring center. It's a very busy center, as you all know. And it also supports the communities of Gardner and Corwin Springs and Silvergate and Cook City. And but we support all their technology, all their systems, their 911 systems, their CAD systems. That's their dispatch system. And it's very complex. So if I didn't get a call in the middle of the night from a dispatcher, then the first thing I do is when I get up at 4:45 in the morning is I look at my phone to see if there's any emails from any dispatchers, and maybe a radio system wasn't working correctly, or they weren't getting, when a 911 call came in, it didn't give the phone number or the address, or it was a, misroute or something like that. So I look for those first thing just to see what the day is going to be like. And if there's none of those, then I, like many employees, live outside, in outside communities. I live in Immigrant up in Paradise Valley. If anybody's watched the Yellowstone TV show, it's not like that, but it's very pretty. But I live, so it's an hour commute for me. And we have a rideshare program that we've been doing since 1991, where employees all ride together, and it's a great thing. So, and I've been the program manager of that since 2016, but so sometimes I'll drive the van and drive a bunch of my employees to work. And anyway, so typical day. Then we get here at 7. A lot of us work 10-hour shifts and get in at 7. And I go around, I work with all my staff. I see what the telephone people are up to, what the IT people are up to, what kind of challenges they have, what's on the agenda for the day, what the alarm shop's doing, what the radio shop's doing. And after I've caught up with all of them, then it's like a lot of other jobs. It's emails and contracts and phone calls and meetings.
Gotcha. And so that day that you said you walked across the street to start working for the Park Service, obviously you didn't start out as like a supervisory telecommunications specialist. So can you tell us kind of your path from there to where you are now? Like, did you have other jobs in the meantime, or?
Yeah, that
that
was pretty linear. I came across the Dual Fire Alarm Systems project. I was working in the engineering department with Xanterra, and we had tackled some big fire alarm system deficits. We took care of big buildings with Xanterra, the concessionaire. We did the Old Faithful Inn, the Lake Hotel. Really important overnight occupancies where you can't have, you can't empty the building in the middle of the night because of a nuisance alarm. We did that sometimes. So we got things kind of under wraps over there, and then there were some deficits over here, and they wanted me to tackle that. So that's the job I got hired for. But then I became the alarm shop supervisor, and then my supervisor at the time that hired me, he went on to be the superintendent of American Samoa National Park. So then I detailed in his position, and eventually I got the position. So,
nice.
And he's now the superintendent of Death Valley. So he never liked the cold.
Yeah,
I was about to say, he's
Yeah.
not the place to be if you don't like cold here in Yellowstone.
But an interesting thing about him is he hiked every single trail in Yellowstone.
Wow.
And he was here 5 years. His name was Mike Reynolds, and he's still the superintendent of Death Valley. And then when he completed that project, he started hiking them backwards.
Oh, wow.
And then he left for American Samoa.
Wow.
So, yeah, I haven't done
That is an accomplishment.
I'd like to do that, but it hasn't happened yet.
So you kind of ran through all of them, but I'm just curious if you could restate all of the different systems that fall under telecommunications in the park, because I think people, I sometimes I forget, I'm like, I think I'm covering all of them, and I forget fire alarms or something like that.
I forget sometimes too.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot.
And then we're reminded. So the radio systems is a really important one, the land mobile radio system. We've got a big complex system, and that's what the rangers use to talk. And we send out pages. We still do pages for our advanced life support crews and EMTs. Law enforcement. There's resource protection people that are doing bear jams and animal jams and things like that. And it's just safety too for people working in the backcountry so they can communicate. So radio is a really important thing. We have telephones. We've got about 500 landlines and 180, 190 cell phone lines. So we manage all those contracts and all that hardware for that and the network that it takes to push it out there. The IT department, we've got a very complex network to get it out there. As the chief information officer came out here one time from the Department of the Interior. He said the last mile is Mammoth. So everything we do to get that from Mammoth to the rest of the park is magic. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of different methods. So then we do internet services. We do all the right-of-way permits for the cell companies. There's a few of those in the park, 5 towers that we try to hide. There's what else? Telephone systems.
Alarm systems, you were saying.
Alarm systems, fire alarm systems, security alarm systems, video security.
And then the dispatch, which is, like you said,
dispatch support,
very complex and very important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I hope I didn't leave anything off so any of my staff is disappointed. But yeah, we do all that, and we try to keep it behind the scenes. So the visitors come and they see the resource and the animals and everything, and this goes unseen, but it's critical to keep them safe. And
right.
So
very important stuff behind the scenes that a lot of people, like you said, they visit and they would never know
hopefully
what's going on. Yeah, hopefully that's the goal.
Well, and I think a lot of parks in different settings have a lot of these things. They don't have to manage them themselves. We're such a big place. It's like, there's cell phone towers outside of smaller units, or telecommunication stuff kind of comes right up to the edge. Not that they don't have things that they need to do, but I always tell people Yellowstone, it's like a mini state in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. Yeah. If you can have a cell tower at a gateway community that covers where you need it to cover, that's great. We don't have to put it on federal land, but we don't that just doesn't work here. It just doesn't reach far enough.
Right.
Yeah. So what would you say is the most important skill for your job?
Most important skill, prioritizing. Technical aptitude is the obvious one. A broad array of technical experience.
Yeah.
You have to be kind of a generalist in a lot of ways and, a specialist in others. But yeah, prioritization is really important. Essentialism is really important, which is kind of like prioritization, but doing what's most important all the time. And finding focus is really important because multitasking is kind of a defeatist sort of a skill. I think you do a better job for your customers when you're more focused and less multitasking.
Yeah. And so what would you say is your favorite part of your job?
Well, it's probably a boring answer, but it's true. I really like coming in and working with all my staff, seeing them face to face. We do have some remote workers, especially in IT, and they're great. And it's really fun to interact with people at different parks in different parts of the country. But, interacting with the staff, they're enthusiastic. A lot of them have been around for a long time. And you bounce ideas off each other and they resource and network. And so that's great. The other best part about the job is probably going to like remote repeater sites up on mountaintops, and we'll hike to some of those. Sometimes we fly, we try not to. But skiing to them is pretty cool. It takes a lot of planning and you got to be safe, but that's a great way to stay connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's been some good trips up to Mount Holmes the past few years, I feel like.
Yeah.
Among others.
Yeah.
But I know I've seen some pictures from that in challenging conditions. Things always like to go down in the middle of the winter, it seems like.
Yeah. And we do everything we can to make sure that they're going to hold up for the winter, do all that work in the summer. But occasionally they quit. So you have to travel.
Yeah, we get some less than ideal weather in Yellowstone sometimes.
Just
we do.
Sometimes.
We certainly do. Sometimes you can't fly, so you have to take other methods to get there. And sometimes you just have to wait.
And where are those located?
We have 8 mountaintop repeaters. We have one on Druid Peak in the Lamar that you can't see. We have one on Henderson Mountain just outside of the park. We have one on Top Notch, which is in the park. We have one on Mount Washburn, which you can drive to for about 4 months of the year. That's quite a luxury. We have one just outside of the park on Survey Peak, in right on the edge of Grand Teton National Park in the Jebediah Smith Wilderness area, which is funny. You have to land the helicopter right on the park side because that's recommended wilderness, and Jebediah is actual wilderness, so no helicopters. So it's like an invisible line right on the peak. And then there's also Sheridan has one with a 1926 New Deal era fire lookout up there.
Wow.
That's really cool. And Mount Holmes, there's one on there. There's one on Purple Mountain. And the Mount Holmes one was inside a 1926 fire lookout, but it got struck by lightning and went down in a blaze. So let's see, did I miss any? Oh, Bunsen Peak also, which is just outside of Mammoth.
Which people can hike up to if they want.
They can.
Yeah. And see that one.
The Holmes one made me sad. That was the first one I'd ever hiked up to of the fire lookouts. I was sad when that burned down.
Yeah.
Such a cool location.
Sure was.
And so you mentioned your favorite parts of the job. On the other side of that, what are some of the toughest things that you encounter in your position?
The toughest things is when things crash. That's a real challenge. Those middle of the night calls, you have to wake up and be lucid and understand what the problem is and who your resources are, and get to the root of the problem pretty quickly. It always amazes me how quickly we can restore something that seems catastrophic. So that's really challenging. Other things, like we may have links go down for days and there's been 2 times in my career that we lost Mount Washburn, which is kind of a hub, and we didn't have any cell service at all. And there's a lot of medicals in Yellowstone. There's a lot of, heart attacks and life flights and things like that. And when someone can't call 911 from an interior location, that burden just falls on us really hard. And if you're in the middle of something else and that call comes in, you're just, there's really no backup for you. So you just have to be fully engaged. Last fall that happened, and there's only been a handful of times that it happened, but last fall it happened the night before I direct a running race north of Yellowstone. And so as the director, I was very busy and probably going to be up all night, but this happened in the middle of the night. So managing those two things was hard. So
yeah, I can imagine emergencies like that can be very stressful.
Yeah.
But
exciting.
Yeah, exciting and thankful that you're there to assist.
But then it's good to, there's always an upside to a challenge, an opportunity with a challenge, but just having a phone full of resources and knowing that I can get a hold of, a power company representative in the middle of the night, a cell tower company representative in the middle of the night, and I can get these things back up with their help. Everywhere in America, the linemen are always out in the worst times, and they're kind of heroes when it comes to that sort of stuff. So that's the role we have to fill.
Yeah. So even with those types of difficulties or challenges that you might encounter, what keeps you here? What keeps you working for the National Park Service? Why do you stick around?
Oh, gosh, all kinds of things. Just the whole mission of it. Oh, one of the biggest things is just that this is just still an intact ecosystem, and all the predator-prey relationship, all the predators that are restored, and that's amazing. And I've been here 30 years, and you don't get over that. So that's a thing, and then the people, and I don't know, I could go on and on. Yeah. Skiing's pretty good.
Yeah. Maybe not this winter.
I try not to talk about skiing too much because you guys only have so much time.
Yeah. We'll have to hear some ski stories another time. But do you have in all your years being here in Yellowstone, working for the National Park Service, do you have a defining moment? Is there a moment that sticks out to you that you're like, yes, like that's why I work here, and it was super rewarding?
Okay, here comes a ski story.
Okay, perfect.
We had Mount Holmes, and Miles, you reference this, but in 2011, Mount Holmes, the repeater antenna went down in December, and there was a big storm coming in. And the Mount Holmes repeater is also used by Montana State Patrol for Highway 191 outside of the park, where there's a lot of accidents. It's a dangerous road. It's a pretty important one. So, but we couldn't get a helicopter in because the storm front was coming in fast. So we decided we were going to ski it. So it was a team of three. It was another guy, Dustin Seen. He was a radio tech with us. Now he's the superintendent of Bighorn National Monument and Bighorn Recreational Area and some other stuff. And Doug Krause, who's our hel tech foreman. We put together that trip in December, which there isn't much daylight. And we thought we'd stay in the Winter Creek cabin on the way in. We opened up the door, and it was about a half-inch deep in mouse poop. Ooh. So we said, nope. We're not going to do that. We thought we can push to the summit. So it was a real big effort. We got to the summit, and I got the cabin opened, and the storm was starting to pick up. And this is a 10,300 foot peak. It's a big effort. It took hours, and
it's a long ski in too, right?
it is a long ski. Yeah, it's a
10 miles.
Yeah,
one way,
it's right? eight hard miles. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got the cabin opened up. We got a temporary antenna installed, testing it out, and then we got that door closed. And the storm came in and just blew so hard all night. It just rattled that fire lookout all night. And but that was pretty neat. We were testing the radio from inside, and we were talking to Montana Highway Patrol on this really remote site. And next morning, ski out was nice.
Oh, that's super cool.
So that was good.
Yeah.
Good trip.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a defining moment. But that's one of the good ones.
Yeah. Definitely memorable. It sounds like.
Yeah.
So I'm just, you said about 30 years you've been doing telecommunications stuff in Yellowstone, right?
Yeah.
I feel like of course, all fields change over time, but I feel like telecoms may be the fastest changing field in the past 30 years, I would venture. So what's it been like to see? I mean, even I'm trying to think, my first summer here was 2006. And I think there was like a payphone in our dorm. I mean, there was no internet that we could even use, or my cell phone didn't work unless I drove a long way. I would think I was at Canyon. And you were here well before that. So what's it been like to see the change? Because now I'm at home and I can stream 4K movies from a satellite. It's so different.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So my first summer was 89 and we had a payphone and we couldn't get radio stations and we couldn't get TV stations. We watched VHS movies at the pub. That was fun. But it has changed a lot, and that's always a topic of discussion. And whenever there's some sort of new proposal, we get a lot of comments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've noticed that people are very invested in the connectivity in Yellowstone.
Yeah, so there's two different aspects to your question. There's the expectation of a wilderness experience or a historic experience as well. But then there's also keeping up with what the needs are. And then, we're also a government agency, so we're on a government network and we have cybersecurity issues and we have to protect those perimeters like vigilantly as much as any other government agency.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always protecting ourselves from threats, so that's the biggest agent of change these days, is keeping up with that and all the training and what we have to do for that. But everything in the middle between then and now, we've gone from, like you said, you had a cell phone, there was very few towers.
Mm-hmm.
We've added a few. We've definitely put a stop to more towers. But there was a point when Suzanne Lewis was the superintendent and she said, I'm the only one who's going to have a cell phone. And then, then that expanded a little bit, and now we've got 150 of them out there because it's kind of a tool that everybody has to use, and the cost has gone down. But so, yeah, that's a big question. It's changed. A lot has changed. And we're fortunate to have some people that have been working in IT for 35 years, which is pretty neat because it's fun to hear their stories.
Mm-hmm.
But we also do have a wireless communications plan that the park put together in 2009, and that limits a lot of our wireless technology. Mm. So the intent of that is to not have cellular service on the roadways and in the backcountry and limit it to the developed areas and only specific developed areas, which is a bit of a compromise. This is still one of those places in the lower 48. You can drive from Mammoth to Old Faithful and not have a cell signal for, what is that, 52, 53 miles?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see, especially with how ubiquitous internet connectivity has become everywhere. I think sometimes visitors come and they're just like, some people come specifically for that and other people are just shocked. They're like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean my Google Maps doesn't tell me where to go? Or like, where can I get Wi-Fi here?
Yep.
And there's one place, it's 3 hours away.
Yeah. I get the visitor comments in both perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. In both directions.
Sometimes in the middle, but usually strongly one way or the other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're getting into the nitty gritty here. If somebody were to go on USA Jobs and want to apply, to work in telecommunications, what series would they be looking for?
Well, the telecommunications series is the 0391. Electronics technician, which is our radio technicians and alarm technicians, are 0856. And the IT specialists are 2210 or 2210. And that's a really fast growing series because everything is connected by networks now. So radio's connected, telephone's connected by networks. So that's a good one to look for. And there's a lot of recruiting going on in the IT world. So you could, in my branch, you could be any one of those threes.
Okay. And so are the opportunities available from like entry level all the way up? What does that look like?
Yeah. 7, 9, 11, 13.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so what types of training or anything like that would people need to get into that type of work?
Oh, you just fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. A variety of stuff. Radio technicians, we hire a lot from the military because they get really good training.
Oh, yeah.
Setting up antennas and repeaters and base stations and microwave network extenders and things like that. But anyone who's worked with radio frequency technology, IT, there's all kinds of, you can be Cisco certifications, you can be, graduate in computer science. We've hired those. A lot of people just gain a lot of knowledge and experience from jobs. And so as a hiring official myself, I look for all of those things. Myself, I have a bachelor's in the School of Technology with a specialty in organizational leadership. So I'm a lot of, leading a group as much as the technical. So it varies. There's no straight track.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'll kind of find that in the Park Service as well. People kind of come from all kinds of backgrounds as well. So
yeah.
I
think knowledge and experience counts for more on a resume for this line of work than a degree does. But yeah, I don't know. We've hired some recent graduates too. So
do you have any advice if people were interested in applying or, getting that experience? What advice would you give for them?
Yellowstone, we feel like we're really specialists. A lot of small parks have one technology person and everything's thrown at them. But we're really, as far as the industry goes, we're generalists.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in IT, if you're doing like system administration, also learn about networking and also learn about cybersecurity and learn about maybe coding, So branch out a little bit. And if you're, if you're into radios, also learn about networking so you can do radio over IP. So I would say that those are important things to do. If you want to work for us doing fire alarm systems, get like a NICET certification, National Institute for Certification in Engineering Technologies. And that tells me that you really know the codes, the fire codes in and out, and you're not going to build a system that's not going to work. So
cool.
Those are a few tips.
Yeah, that's great. And so finally, the last question we like to ask everybody is just about your personal experience, any memorable experience you've had. It could be either in Yellowstone or any other national park, work or personal time. Do you have a moment that sticks out to you?
Yeah, the 5 years I worked in the Bear Den ski shop at Snow Lodge.
Yeah.
That was the peak of my career, not of my pay, but
it's often how it works.
Yeah.
But it's been going up and down ever since. So yeah, that was great. We worked there the last year that it was open. It was the Snow Lodge then was nothing more than really, it looked like a roadside motel. It was cheap. Anybody could afford to stay there. The people that came to visit, they were all interesting. And the Bear Den ski shop was a log cabin with a wood stove right next to it. And that was great. They built a new hotel, the Snow Lodge Hotel, and the ski shop's in the gift shop now, and it's all still good. But those are good days back then. There was quite a community back then too. They were really strong skiers and outdoors people, and just a lot of fun.
That sounds awesome.
And many rangers worked in that ski shop too over the years before they moved over to the Park Service.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps it up.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Brett.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of What We Do. Thanks again to our guest, Brett DeYoung. If you like what we do, rate and review the show wherever you listen. Every positive review helps new listeners find the show. If you have questions or want to learn more about a particular job, contact us using the form at go.nps.gov/whatwedopodcast. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everyone. This is Ranger Jake here in Yellowstone National Park, and today we're filming in Mammoth Hot Springs area. Over my shoulder, we have Mount Everett in the background, and I'm joined today by our bear management biologist, Carrie Gunther, And that's because today we're going to be talking about the past, present, and future of bear management in Yellowstone. So I want to thank you for joining us in this next installment of our 150th anniversary virtual video series. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump behind the camera and we'll get started, and we'll let Kerry take it away. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thanks. So Yellowstone National Park was established in 1872, and it was set aside primarily to protect the geysers and the thermal features, and bears and other wildlife really weren't one of the primary considerations when the park was established. However, bears quickly became one of the park's primary attractions. Early in the park's history, hotels were built in some of the geyser basins, and garbage management was quite a bit different back then, and so the garbage from the hotel kitchens was just dumped right out back behind the hotel. By the early 1890s, the park superintendent was reporting that large numbers of black bears had begun to congregate to feed on the garbage piles behind these hotels. And then within a few years, the superintendent was also reporting that large numbers of grizzly bears were now also congregating at those garbage piles. So park visitors would come, tour the geyser basins, come back to the hotel in the evening for dinner, and then just before dark would go out to watch bears feed on the garbage behind the hotels. And this became so popular with park visitors that the National Park Service actually formalized the procedure and put in lunch counters for bears, as they called them, and they would take the choicest barrels of kitchen scraps and dump them on a platform, and then had log bleachers that visitors could sit in, and hundreds of people a night could sit and watch bears feed on garbage. By 1910, the first report of black bears panhandling for human food handouts along park roads were reported by the superintendent. So even before we had motorized vehicles in the park, bears were learning to beg for human food handouts from park visitors traveling through the park in horse and wagon. And then this quickly took off as a primary tourist attraction, and Yellowstone National Park became known as a place where you could see bears up close, you could interact with bears, you could feed bears, you could use food to lure bears into interesting positions for photographs. And from that point on, Yellowstone really became known as kind of a bear park. Management of our developed areas and campgrounds was also quite a bit different. We didn't have bear-proof garbage cans or dumpsters. We didn't have bear-proof food storage lockers. And there were no ordinances initially preventing people from feeding bears. And so grizzly bears and black bears would come into the developments and the campgrounds and usurp food from park visitors, sometimes taking their food right off the picnic table as the visitors ran away. Having all these bears that were conditioned to human foods, getting fed by visitors, they were habituated to the presence of people, interacting so closely with park visitors also led to a lot of bear-human conflicts. So from the 1930s, when the park began keeping good records, up through the 1960s, we were averaging 138 bear-caused property damages per year, typically damage to people's vehicles, camping equipment, tents, buildings, mostly with bears trying to get access to human food or garbage. And we were also averaging 48 bear attacks per year. So with 48 bear-inflicted human injuries per year, things were fairly dangerous. A lot of these injuries were relatively minor, but some were quite severe. And so the park began looking into efforts to try to reduce the number of bear-human conflicts and the number of bear-inflicted human injuries that were occurring in the park. Then in 1967 in Glacier National Park, 2 people were killed in 2 separate incidents in one night by 2 different grizzly bears. And that was really a wake-up call for the National Park Service that all the bear parks had to clean up the parks so that bears weren't getting into so many conflicts with people. So that led to Yellowstone National Park implementing a new bear management program in 1970. As part of that program, we closed all the garbage dumps in the park, and from that point forward, we began shipping our garbage out to incinerator in Livingston, Montana, well out of occupied grizzly bear habitat. We also bear-proofed all our garbage cans and dumpsters in the park. We began strictly enforcing regulations that prohibited recreational hand feeding of bears. We also converted our backcountry campsite system from dispersed camping, where you could pretty much camp anywhere you wanted in the backcountry. We converted to a designated backcountry campsite system where you got a permit for a specific campsite, and in each designated campsite we provided either a food storage pole or a food storage locker. And that really cleaned up our backcountry campsites of any conflicts with bears. We also began campground food security patrols each evening to make sure everybody put their food away, locked up in their car in a bear-proof manner. And we did several other things. We began carcass management, where we move carcasses. If an ungulated elk or a deer dies in a development or a campground, we'll move that so it doesn't attract bears into our developments and campgrounds or right next to the road, to try to reduce the number of interactions between bears and people. Now, bears had a tough time coping with the loss of the human food handouts and garbage, and so a lot of bears persisted in trying to obtain human food and garbage, and often damaged property in the process. So a lot of those bears were removed in management actions, and so that 1970 management program initially led to very high human-caused mortality, as these bears that had grown up mostly eating garbage were removed from the population if they couldn't figure out a way to persist on the native foods found in the park. We also saw that our cub production declined, so average litter size went down. The first age that adult females would have their first litter, that increased. Bears were older before they have their first litter. And then the interbirth interval, so the number of years between litters, also increased. And this was probably due to bears that were used to feeding on garbage, didn't have that garbage to supplement the native foods, and so they lost weight, and then cub production declined, and cub survival also declined during that period. And ultimately, this is what led to grizzly bears being listed as a threatened species in 1975. So for about the first 5 years of our new 1970 management program, things weren't going very well as far as the bear population was declining due to that high mortality combined with low cub production and survival. However, over time, we learned how to reduce human-caused mortality of grizzly bears in the park by preventing them from ever getting into human foods. Then they didn't cause conflicts, and so we didn't have to remove them in management actions. So eventually our population began to increase. Our females figured out how to more efficiently survive on the natural foods found in the park, and so cub production went back up to about what it was. Average age of first reproduction declined again down, so bears were having their first litters at a younger age, and then that interbirth interval also got shorter. So females were producing more litters and having better survival of those cubs.
Was that something that you guys predicted, thinking that once we do this, we are going to see these effects, but they're going to be somewhat short term and then they'll turn around? Or was it like, oh no, what did we do?
We did believe that there'd be high initial mortality. I think the mortality, though, was higher than anybody actually expected, even higher than what people expected. And so the Craighead brothers, who were doing research here at the time, believed that prior to the dump closures, there was about 222 to 245 grizzly bears in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, with most of those centered in Yellowstone National Park. After the high mortality associated with the dump closures, the Craighead brothers estimated that the population declined down to just 136 grizzly bears. So that mortality was higher. Even though people expected slightly higher mortality, they didn't predict that it would be as high as it was. And then once grizzly bears were listed as a threatened species, all the land and wildlife management agencies in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem began working together to conserve bears and reduce human-caused mortality and protect habitat. And so over time then, the population began to increase, and today population estimates are about 1,000 to 1,100 grizzly bears in the ecosystem, up from possibly as few as 136 in the mid-1970s. And when grizzly bears were listed as a threatened species in 1975, it was estimated that they occupied an area of about 6,000 square miles in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, so Yellowstone National Park and some of the wilderness areas surrounding the park. Today, the population occupies an area of over 26,000 square miles, so significant range expansion, to the point now where grizzly bears in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem are only about 65 kilometers from grizzly bears in the northern Continental Divide ecosystem. So in the next generation or two, we might get connectivity between the two populations.
And what's the benefit of that?
Genetically, you always worry about an island population due to effects of inbreeding. So if we can get these two populations connected, where bears can pass from one to the other, it would really help the population genetics on a long-term basis.
And do they think, like, I'm guessing the 65 kilometers is documented, and do we know, like, can you make an assumption or infer, like, you know, if we're documenting them this close, it's possible that they may even be closer or wandering in and out that we're just unaware of?
Yes, it'll take us time to discover once bears do interbreed between the two populations. So genetically, we can tell if they do. We are getting some reports of grizzly bears in between the two populations now, within that 65 kilometers. We can't always confirm those, but we're starting to see signs of it. So, you know, it likely will happen depending on how high the human-caused mortality is in that area.
Gotcha. Cool. So what else is going on today as far as, you know, what are, with all those things that we were doing in the past and then what we're doing today? I mean, what's a typical day for you out in the park, you know, regarding bear management? What's it look like these days?
Yeah, these days we have conflicts at a very low level. We'll have only 2 to 4 grizzly bear human conflicts in a year now, and some of those are pretty benign, where we used to have 138 conflicts a year. So we've really reduced the number of conflicts. We really jump on our management right away. So if a bear shows up in a development or in a campground, our dispatch will call us and we'll come haze the bear out using rubber bullets, beanbag rounds, or cracker shells. And we do a lot of food storage management. We're still doing food security patrols. We're installing bear boxes in all our roadside campgrounds. So we have almost 2,000 campsites. And we used to require that people just store their food in their car. But the more easy and convenient we make food storage regulations for park visitors, the more likely they are to comply. So by putting in a food storage box in every campground, it makes it real easy. So people can just throw all their food in the bear food storage box and they can go out and tour the park. And it keeps bears safe, and it also makes it easy and convenient for visitors to comply with that regulation. We're still doing a lot of carcass management. Nowadays, if an elk or a bison dies near a road or a campground, it might attract anywhere from half dozen to a dozen grizzly bears. So we move carcasses to places where bears can feed on them undisturbed by people. So the bears still get the nutrition, they still get the food, but not with 100 people within 10 or 20 yards trying to take pictures of them. And this keeps visitors safe as well.
And what about just like typical, like even when there's not a grizzly or not a carcass on the side of the road and bears are moving around, what's it like for a visitor coming, viewing bears these days? What's some good practices that they should follow?
Yeah, seeing bears is very common today. So we'll get, thousands of reports a summer of people seeing bears. Some bears still get very used to people, but they're not getting human food. So they'll be feeding in the meadows right next to the road. And, those will create big bear jams where all kinds of people stop to view and photograph and just appreciate bears. And so what we ask in those situations, be considerate of the bear. The bear really just wants to be left alone. But, you can take your pictures and stuff. We just ask that all visitors maintain at least a 100-yard distance from bears. So if the bear is moving towards the road to cross it, don't get in front of it. Move away so you maintain that 100 yards. That makes it safe for the visitor, safe for the bear. Don't follow, approach, or encircle bears. A lot of times everyone wants a front row seat for a picture, so they'll form a big circle around a bear. Bears might get a little agitated and nervous if they feel enclosed in by that many people. So, treat the bear with respect. Think about the poor bear that's out there. He's a bear. He just wants to be left alone. He needs to be feeding in those meadows. So, don't be running. A bear that might cause a bear to chase you. Don't be yelling and making a lot of noise. When you're at a roadside traffic jam, be respectful of the bear and maintain that 100-yard distance.
And what about people in the backcountry? Is there any particular, or if you're hiking, if you're getting away from the road, is there any particular thing that we, want to impress on people?
Yeah, so backcountry hiking, we like to reduce injuries as much as possible. We currently average just 1 injury per year, and it's typically a surprise encounter, usually a solo hiker that has a surprise encounter with a female with cubs. And the female, she believes that the hiker's a threat to her cubs. She just wants to neutralize that threat, gather up her cubs, and leave. So you can reduce the odds significantly by, first of all, hiking in larger groups. So groups of 3 or more people are rarely ever injured by bears. So if you can just find 2 friends to hike with, you'll have significantly reduced the odds of being injured by a bear. Then when you're hiking, we ask everybody to carry bear spray. Bear spray is a very cost-effective method of diffusing aggression in bears. So it's a hot pepper solution that you spray out of a can if a bear's charging you. So we recommend that everybody hiking in the backcountry carry bear spray and know how to use it. And then another very cost-effective way of reducing the odds of being attacked by a bear in the backcountry is to make noise, especially in blind spots on the trail. So if you're coming up over a hill or around a tight corner in dense vegetation regrowth, give a couple shout outs, hey bear, just so the bear hears you coming so it has time to leave and disperse before you come around the corner and surprise it. If you do encounter a bear up close, what we recommend is first of all try slowly backing away. Often by putting a little bit of distance between you and that female with cubs, it'll diffuse the situation. Now that doesn't mean turn and run, because bears chasing that run. They're very predacious on elk calves, so they're used to running down things that run away from them. So you want to just slowly back away, and again, that distance you're putting between yourself and the female will often diffuse the situation. If the bear becomes agitated and charges, then you want to stop and stand your ground. By standing your ground, you're showing the bear that you're willing to defend yourself. And most of the time, if you stand your ground, the bear's going to either stop the charge short or veer off to the side at the last minute. And it usually won't follow through and make contact. Anytime you have a bear charging you, when it's 60 feet or closer, that's about the range of bear spray. So bear spray goes about 30 feet. But so when the bear's about 60 feet away, it's coming very fast. You want to start spraying, put a big cloud of bear spray in front of you, so the bear has to run through that cloud of bear spray, and then just keep emptying the bear spray into the bear's face. And bear spray is over 90% effective at stopping aggressive behavior in bears.
Awesome. So so we talked about the past and the present, and so I guess what are your hopes, for the future of bear management in Yellowstone National Park? What sort of things are we working on?
Well, we think with the way that our climate is warming, that our foods are going to change some. So we might lose some bear foods. We could gain some bear foods. Some bear foods are probably going to be less abundant. Others might become more abundant. So we really have to keep a close eye on this population. And again, bears, they're an omnivore generalist. They eat a lot of different things. Bears used to occupy habitat all the way from the Arctic Circle down into Mexico. So they're capable of surviving in a lot of different vegetation types, which actually that will help them with climate change, because they can survive in a lot of different climates with different vegetation. But they're always very vulnerable to human-caused mortality. So we're going to have to continually try to figure out ways to keep human-caused mortality to an absolute minimum in this ecosystem to try to keep to conserve our bear population.
And how far away are we from all of the food storage containers in the park right now?
Yeah, with food storage containers, we currently have a bear pole or a food storage locker in all 300 of our backcountry campsites. And in the roadside car campgrounds, we have about 1,100 bear boxes installed, and we have about 2,000 campsites in the park. So we're probably still about 3 or 4 years we'll finish putting a bear box in every campsite in the roadside car campgrounds.
Awesome, that's good. So so before we sign off, as someone who has worked in Yellowstone with bears for nearly 40 years, I feel like there might be some sort of a cool story or anecdote that you tell with friends when you're sitting around a campfire or something like that. I was curious if you have a story off the top of your head that you might share with our audience.
Well, yeah, boy, in 40 years I have a lot of stories. With bears, I think what I find so unique about bears is they're all individuals, and they're extremely intelligent. So they're a lot like humans. Unlike elk, all elk seem to do about the same thing, but each bear's an individual, and they have a personality, and bears will play and have fun. They'll be mad and upset. So it's just, never a dull moment with bears, and they'll always surprise you. And in a lot of ways, they're actually very predictable, though, in how they respond to humans. I think park visitors are much more unpredictable than bears are.
All right. Well, we'll jump back on here. With that, I want to thank Carrie for joining us today for the next installment of our 150th anniversary video series. Thanks for talking to us about the past, present, and future of bear management. And thank you for your support for Yellowstone National Park, and we'll see you at the next video.
From Yellowstone National Park, this is What We Do. I'm Miles Barger.
And I'm Ashton Hooker.
Hey, Ashton.
Hey, Miles.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Are you ready to record a fire podcast today?
Yes.
Straight fire?
Fire podcast
Straight
coming
fire?
your way.
Because today we're going to talk to John Cataldo, Yellowstone's fire management officer. And before we get started, I have to do a little fire trivia. It's going to be a trite one, but I think it's still interesting. So Yellowstone, record fire, 1988. How many acres of the park burned
Ooh.
during those fires?
I know it was massive. I know it was a lot.
It was a lot.
I'm
You
going to
can
say...
round to the nearest 100,000 if you want.
Okay, I was going to say a few 100,000. I'll say 600,000 acres.
You're
Up.
a little
I'm getting,
higher.
I'm getting the up motion.
A little more.
800,000?
That would be the right rounding.
Oh, nice. Wow.
793,880 is the official number I found.
Do you
but,
know, like, if we were to compare,
and that's
what's
in
that
Yellowstone.
size?
That's not the full fire.
like,
complex,
what's
correct?
like 800,000 acres compared to?
Gosh, that's a good question. Yellowstone's 2.2-ish million,
Okay.
which is what states combined? Rhode Island and
It's two Rhode Island
2 Rhode Islands.
and the chain.
So maybe 2/3 of a Rhode Island. It was 36% of the park. Pretty big.
That's a pretty big fire.
Yeah, pretty big. And that's just inside of Yellowstone. Anyway, there's our trivia. But today, like I said, we're talking to John Cataldo, Fire Management Officer. You ready to dive in?
I'm ready.
All right, good. So in your career, have you always worked for the National Park Service in your career? Or did you start with a different agency in terms of fire?
I started with the National Park Service in 1992,
Mm-hmm.
and I've kind of oscillated back and forth between the U.S. Forest Service
Mm-hmm.
and the National Park Service, but always a federal agency.
Okay.
Yep.
What was your first job in fire?
My first job in
Or in
fire,
general?
well, in general, it was actually part of my financial aid package when I was an undergrad at Humboldt State University.
Mm-hmm.
I was offered a work study opportunity as part of my financial aid. And I was studying wildlife management at Humboldt State University in Northern California. And my advisor and the department chair was married to the branch chief of wildlife at Redwood National Park. And I was on academic scholarship as well at Humboldt. And he kind of passed my name along to to his wife and said, we've got a potential work study student if you interested in picking them up for some work. And they gave me a key to the office for Redwood National Park and a pile of wildlife observation cards that visitors employees had filled out. And it was a pile pretty much up to the ceiling. And they gave me a key to the office and let me go in there 10 to 15 hours a week, all during the school year and just at my own pace whenever I could fit it in between classes and whatnot. And that was kind of my very first Park Service job.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. So how long after that was it when you first got into fire of some kind?
The very next summer, I was working up in Alaska for the Forest Service
Nice.
in Cordova,
Mm-hmm.
which is the last place I ever moved to without checking the Farmer's Almanac for like how much rain or sun it gets or doesn't get. And turns out that Cordova, Alaska gets 169 inches of rain a year. And I was working in fisheries at
Oh,
the
wow.
time. So I studied wildlife and fisheries. in college. And so that was how I got my start in the service, was those sorts of positions. And so working in fisheries, we were outside every day in Cordova, wearing rain gear. And I mean, honestly, after a couple months of that, I was basically pruning. Like it had just been like, you just had been in the shower for 2 months. And they said, hey, do you want to go to fire school? And I just said, is it indoors? And they were like, yeah, it's down here. And the district office was an old courthouse of some kind. And it was like, yeah, fire school was in the judge's chambers or something in the courthouse. And it was in fact indoors. And I said, yeah, I'm your man. And so I took fire school. And of course, the place where it rains that much, you don't get a lot of fires. But it was an exceptionally dry summer there the next year when I returned, and we had a couple of like little fires out on the Copper River Delta, fireworks or something. And I got to go to those. And then the 1994 fire season in the lower 48, which is kind of another benchmark fire season in the lower 48, at least, kicked off in August. And I spent the last 6 or 8 weeks deployed down here on fire crews. They kind of went to each little team on the district up in Alaska, and everyone had to volunteer somebody to go be a firefighter. And I was good at hiking and carrying a big pack and stuff. And they said, why don't you go? I said, let's go.
Well, so what did you said you were studying wildlife starting out.
Yeah.
Did you ever envision yourself being in fire? Like what were you kind of working toward before you got the offer of like, hey, you can come indoors and learn how to
like,
deal with fire.
Just working towards, a career as a wildlife biologist or a fisheries biologist. I studied both, and I grew up loving it and, loving the outdoors and whatnot. I'm a kid from suburban Long Island, New York, like 20 miles outside the city. And that was my big escape, was going to the woods. And, even if that was running around catching garter snakes under garbage on the side of some parkway on Long Island, which is honestly how you start in wildlife management.
Wow, beautiful,
you're
yes.
A little suburban Long Island kid, there's not a lot of open wild spaces or places to get away from the crowds. So the woods kind of became my retreat when I was young, and just got out the book of colleges, when you're in high school, and it's like the size of a phone book, and it's every college in the country and all the programs they offer, and picked 3 or 4 of the top wildlife management programs. And one of them happened to be 4 hours from where my brother lived in Oregon. And
nice.
Ended up at Humboldt.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So when you finally did get into fire, what was it that kept you there?
I've always been into, played a lot of sports growing up. So I like being really physical. And honestly, probably statistics and organic chemistry pushed me towards firefighting, because to kind of take the next step in wildlife and fisheries, it was going to be really heavy. And, you kind of get to that point in your education where it's like, I don't know if I'm ready to take the next step.
I think organic chemistry is that line for quite a few people.
Yeah, it kind of weeds people out, huh?
Yeah. So just working on a team and being outside, and it was just a good fit. It was like I was kind of made to do it. I just enjoyed
right.
it. Yeah, it just felt right. It was just right off the bat. It was a good fit. I just fell right into it. And you're lucky if that happens to you.
Yes.
Whatever
I agree.
you are, whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm like, how did I get to where I am today? And I feel lucky. I don't think I would have planned it. Like you're saying, sometimes these things just happen.
Yeah, I had some apprehension, in the beginning, and just talking to other folks who'd done it previously. And they're like, no, it's great. It's like camping for dollars. Like we're going to go camp for weeks, and we're going to work hard all day, and then we're going to go sleep in a tent, and we're going to get up and do it again. I was like, that sounds great.
So what was I'm guessing, I don't know yet, but I'm guessing a theme in these podcasts that will come up is the career progression can be interesting. So like, what are the steps to go from that, where you're like actively out camping, fighting fire,
yeah,
to where someday you're spending most, if not all your time in an office and dealing with budgets and hiring in the big picture. Like, what did that look like for you timeline wise?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the hazards of the job is someday someone's going to hand you a radio to talk on.
Uh-oh.
That's the first hazard of the job, right? They kind of leave you alone for a few years because it's dangerous to let you be in charge of anything. And then at some point they're like, oh, like you seem pretty squared away. And they hand you a radio, and that's a big fork in the road is you're going to let me talk on the radio while I'm on a fire and actually, help coordinate what's going on. And, yeah, I've held a lot of positions along the way. We get to go a lot of different places in this job, which is also what attracted me to it. I think I've been to fires in 18 different states.
Oh, wow.
At this point. And I'm not done yet.
Right.
I got a lot left in me, but
was one of those states more memorable than the others? Does one stick out to you?
They are so unique. I know it sounds cliche, but I mean, literally I've spent 3 weeks camped 3 feet from the Yukon River in interior Alaska, helping manage a long duration fire up there, and I've done a lot of prescribed fire down in Big Cypress, down in South Florida. So literally this job has taken me from one corner of the country to the other. And a lot of places in between. And you just get to, granted, you're working really long hours while you're there, but you get to see a lot of interesting things. You're off the beaten path a lot.
Yeah.
So you just have a lot of shared experiences, and
must be interesting too, to get to like be pretty intimately familiar with so many different types of forest as well. And like the way fire behaves so differently in these different places. And
yeah. And you have to be a student of it because
I bet
it'll kill you if you're not paying attention. So you are very eager to learn when you go to a new place, like how does it move right through this stuff? Does it move by jumping from tree to tree, or is it mostly ground fire? Are there interesting local factors? Like, does it burn? Some places it burns really hot and downhill at night. Didn't see that coming, right? So you gotta make sure you're being a student and finding the people that understand how fire moves on that particular landscape. And, helps keep us all safe and meet the objective, whatever that is.
Yeah. So let's jump ahead to now.
Okay.
So do you have a typical day in your job?
A lot of what drew me to this is that it's not a lot of typical. I guess should focus on maybe on the summer, because like you mentioned, the winter, when you're in a year-round position and you live at 6,300 feet in a national park, we get a lot of opportunity for winter and typically don't have fires. And in the off season, it is a lot of just planning and for next season and hiring and communicating with our partners and cooperators and just kind of getting on the same page for the next season. But once we kind of throw the switch and the temporary employees come on in the spring and we kind of ramp up and just sort of get into the mode, so to speak. A typical day, we start off with a briefing with everyone on the team, and we get together for about 20 minutes and we go through a safety conversation and a weather conversation, situation, whatever's going on, fires in the park, fires around the park, fires we may find ourselves on later that day. Just whatever's going on, go through a plan for the day. And then we just sort of fledge everyone to their assignments. And typically we'll go 5 different directions on any given day. And we'll be engaged with fuels reduction projects, in some of the urban interface areas around the park. We'll be out monitoring the fuel moisture and different types of fuels that we're curious about in the park. That's a big part of the program, is being prepared for what might come, and how wet or dry the fuels are is a big part of that. So we'll be out doing that, maybe helping our neighbors with some incidents that they're managing. So there's just really, every day is different.
Yeah.
And especially once we get around to like May or so, and then through October, you just really never know what you're getting into.
Right.
So it's a good career field for someone who likes to keep moving and have surprises thrown at them.
There's a lot of moving. Yeah. There's a lot of moving parts. You have to be really,
you're out in the field a lot in the summer?
I get to pick and choose my spots at this point. A lot, unfortunately, the field part of my job is definitely dropped off. particularly here just because of connectivity issues,
Yeah.
because we are so remote, relatively speaking, to a lot of other places in the lower 48,
Mm-hmm.
that because a lot of my day-to-day responsibility is to be what we call a duty officer. So I'm the first phone call on any new potential vegetation fire.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets, however that report comes in from a visitor or from an employee, it'll get routed to our dispatch center. And then they call me as the duty officer and say, here's what we might have. What do you want to do about it?
So you need to be reachable.
I
at
need
all
to be
times,
reachable
basically.
at all times.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if people can't find me, I'm not doing my job. So it does kind of keep me around headquarters
Yeah.
a lot. But of course, I do enjoy getting out on fires.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what, in your current job, what do you think is the most important skill?
For my position, I think the ability to triage a lot of emerging problems
Mm-hmm.
and to pretty quickly sift through what's important and what's noise and what can wait
Mm-hmm.
and what, you're pretty much when things are rocking and rolling, there's a constant state of just, your awareness is just peaked and you're just constantly trying to update what we call a common operating picture of like, what is our fire environment, what's going on, and what the biggest threats are, right? It's all about risk management. I mean, fire management is risk management. So risk to people, first and foremost, risk to infrastructure, buildings, and then everything after that. So yeah, just the ability to maintain the correct flight altitude. And, all of us start out as just ground pounders, right? Swinging a tool, swinging a 5-pound tool 10,000 times a day is how you first prove that you can do this.
Right.
And then you go from there to where you're virtually never swinging a 5-pound tool anymore.
Yeah.
So sometimes when really things start rocking and rolling, some folks will revert to what they're most comfortable with, right? Which is the first thing you ever learn. And they want to kind of get in the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to maintain that 30,000 foot flight altitude as a fire management officer or a duty officer, that's pretty critical.
Well, and that skill to bring in all that different types of information and then be able to make decisions. That probably comes with a lot of experience that you've had over the years. So if you were to what advice, what types of experience should people be seeking out if they want to, get to your type of position one day?
Variety, just really seek variety, and particularly prescribed fires. So controlled burns, another way we describe those. Being involved with that is a great way to just see a lot of fire on the landscape and watch it and not necessarily have to just be responding to it, to take those opportunities to see how it moves and understand the physics of it. Just really pays dividends down the line. So it's just experiential learning, all of it. I mean, there's a big on-the-job training component. We have a huge continuing education component to all of this, where as you progress along, we're sending you to more or less 1 week long classes. We have a lot of 32 to 40 hour classes we'll send you to, but those just sort of complement that field experience. So it's just go full send, just get as much fire under your belt as you possibly can is the best way to be good at my job. And so that's why I oscillated between the two different agencies, because, the Forest Service, that's the big green machine, right? So I think half the U.S. Forest Service budget is fire management.
Wow.
So they're highly invested in it. And that's where the majority of the resources in America are, they're in the green trucks with the different logo. And so coming up in the Park Service was great, but I also realized I'm not seeing enough fire on Park Service land to get as good as I need to get at this to have the job I want to have someday. So I knew I wanted a job like I have now, but to get there, I had to leave the agency, go to a different federal agency, and ended up running a hotshot crew for close to a decade.
Wow.
which is a great way to see a lot of fire.
Yeah.
So that was just all by design. That
Yeah.
I was like, well, I think I've done what I can.
Yeah.
In the Park Service, there just wasn't as many opportunities to move up or move laterally. We just don't have as big a program.
Mm.
And it's like, I'm going to go fight fire with the Forest Service for about a decade. And then I'll come back and I'll feel a lot more confident what I'm doing.
So you did want to end up back at the Park Service?
Absolutely.
Ultimately?
Yeah.
Why that over, like you said, Forest Service is the big agency that's handling all this stuff. What about the Park Service made you want to end up here?
I just love the mission, really. And I mean, it's the greatest, last, best places, right? I mean, the Park Service units are, particularly for me, loving the mountains. I mean, being in the Northern Rockies, it's just outrageous. And this region in particular, I've spent time in the Pacific West and the Pacific Northwest, and I love those systems as well. But I mean, the Rockies are just outrageous. So for me, you can't beat it. So
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Was that kind of same sentiment what drew you to Yellowstone? Or was there some sort of draw to Yellowstone for you in particular?
I've spent about 5 years of my life in Alaska. So one of my early Park Service positions, actually my first permanent appointment, I was the first helicopter manager hired at Denali. In the year 2000, we had the National Fire Plan came out. So we'd had kind of a succession of really intense fire seasons in America. And the result of that was a thing called the 2000 National Fire Plan. And a big part of that was a big injection of funding into fire management in America. So, a lot of life's timing, right? And so when the National Fire Plan rolled around, I had about 9 seasons under my belt, either of fire management or wildlife or fisheries management. And I think three full seasons and a few qualifications under my belt. And then all these permanent jobs popped up. And I was sort of in a really good position to compete for one of them. So that was just good timing. And a lot of my peers, we call ourselves like National Fire Plan babies, because we all got our start. We all got our very first appointment sometime in the spring of 2000.
I mean, I think, a couple of things you said I think are good for people to keep in mind in terms of thinking about wanting to work for federal agencies in general and the Park Service specifically. Is like, there is timing, there is luck, there is when these things come along, and also having the 30,000 foot view of your own career, like you were saying, is like, maybe I need to leave for a while to get these other experiences. Because I think sometimes people think, I'll just be able to follow this exact path that I want and get the jobs I want. And I feel like that so rarely happens with anyone that I know in the Park Service, whether they leave for a completely different field sometimes or switch agencies or whatever. It's like, this is where I would like to be, but I need to get this experience here or this there, or thinking about the career ladders and the way things can go. I think I'm glad that you brought up those points, because I think it's a good thing for people to remember. That's certainly how my career has been. I think almost everybody I talk to.
Yeah. I think a big part of it, I tell folks all the time, to some extent, you have to be prepared to move at the speed of opportunity, and you can't just expect in the federal service and the Park Service, like plant roots in one spot and march up the ladder through your entire career in one place. It's just not realistic. Possible at a massive unit like we work at, right? Because we do have a tremendous organizational chart here and a lot of really deep programs and a lot of career ladder potential. That's pretty unique.
It is.
In the service, though.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, you can go to a lot of parks and there might be, the chief ranger and 2 seasonal law enforcement.
Yep.
At these smaller units, in that career. And obviously you're not going to try to stay in one place for 30 years and become the chief ranger. Like, you might have to step to the side to step up and step back. But there's tremendous opportunity to move around. I think that's a great thing. I wanted to see a lot of places and I wanted to do a lot of different things. And for me, the emphasis in my life wasn't going to be plant roots, start a family young, be in one place. coach the volleyball team or something.
Right.
Like I didn't want to do that. I wanted to like just really move around a lot and just see a lot of things. And like I said, I'm a suburban Long Island kid.
Yeah.
But once I
Mhm.
hit the West, I wasn't slowing down. I
Yeah.
wasn't going to move out West and plant
Yeah.
somewhere. So I've achieved that.
So with all these different experiences that you have, it might be hard to pick one, but is there like a moment in your career that stands out to you as really being a defining moment or even the defining moment? Was there some time where you're like, this is it for me, or was it more gradual?
In my fire service career, I'd say the day that we were certified as a hotshot crew in Northern California, that process took several years and was pretty intense. And so I'll remember that day for the rest of my life for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anytime you're working towards the same goal for 6 years, year round, it's a pretty big day when
Yeah.
someone finally says you're good enough.
Wow.
But within my Park Service experience, really the entire 2016 fire season here in Yellowstone is kind of a benchmark too.
Yeah.
Any fire season you're a part of that ends up with like a commemorative pint glass or something
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
usually probably a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And in that year, we successfully managed 100 square miles of fire
Wow.
in Yellowstone while concurrently celebrating the centennial.
Oh, wow. Big year.
So there was a period of time where we had an incident management team just managing the centennial celebrations in Mammoth and Gardner, Montana. And we had a separate incident management team assigned to the Maple Fire, which was out by West Yellowstone, ultimately burned about 55,000 acres. And we had a third incident management team concurrently managing a basket of about 5 or 6 smaller fires, most of which were out on the northern range of the park. And
Wow.
we had all that going at once, and we didn't have any single serious injuries. Rotating firefighters through that for months on end, and didn't
Wow.
lose a single shingle off the side of a structure.
Wow.
So no one
Wow,
got
that's
hurt.
amazing.
We didn't burn anything up that we didn't want burnt up or
Right.
were willing to accept burning up.
Mhm.
And, 100 square miles of a pretty incredible natural process in the world's first national park. So that year sticks out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just mentioned like protecting these historic, buildings that are in the park and stuff like that. And earlier you mentioned fuels reduction projects.
Mhm.
For people who don't really know what that means, like how do you do that? How do you protect, like, because there's all these historic buildings throughout
Yeah.
the park. How do you go about protecting those?
It's really all about just creating what we call defensible space around those. And we really focus on the first 30 to 300 feet of vegetation immediately around that structure. So we just basically need some elbow room around there to function as firefighters. We can't have little baby trees growing out of the foundations of old buildings and pushing the shingles off the side of them and stuff like that. That'll happen in a place like Yellowstone. Lodgepole pine is a pretty robust species, and it's a little bit weedy in some places where it gets really thick and comes in pretty strong, especially after a fire. So when we're talking about fuels reduction, we're just literally in and around the developed areas in the park, just reducing the amount of biomass. So really
Okay.
focusing on the smaller brush and grasses and trees that are, say, under 4 to 6 inches in diameter, and just removing those and just basically thinning it out.
Okay.
In other areas, we might use prescribed fire or controlled burning to try to accomplish that same objective, because fire is a really efficient way to reduce the amount of biomass around a subdivision. But lodgepole pine, when it burns completely. So its natural fire regime is stand replacement. So it burns from the surface of the ground to the tops of the trees and completely is what we'd expect. And that's not really a great thing to have in and around a community, because you're just trading one problem for another. So you do a controlled burn, and then you have a patch of dead trees next to your homes. And then you're dealing with that. So we just prefer not to do controlled burning around our developed areas. And we just go in and just thin out the vegetation so that if a fire does come in there, it's not moving through the tops of the trees, which is of course where it's really intense and dangerous. It's going to stay on the ground where we can deal with it, and preferably on the ground with flame lengths less than 8 feet. That's kind of our cutoff. If the flames are taller than 8 feet, we're going to need a pretty heavy hand to deal with that. We can't swat that out.
Gotcha.
So for people interested in your field, your career field, what, before we get to your series and grade and all that kind of stuff, where would people look if they wanted to get started in fire? Like what series would they look for?
We're actually going through a really big transition right now in how we're classified as firefighters. We were forestry technicians for the first few decades of this profession. And essentially, it's been decided over the past few years that's not a very accurate description of wildland firefighting for lots of good reasons. And so now there's a new wildland firefighter job series, and that's 0456. And it's designed to be a hire to retire job series. So we're going to be recruiting and advertising positions in that from now on, literally from the GS3 to the GS15 level.
Wow.
So
that's really cool.
Yeah. And previous to that, we were hiring entry level positions as 0462 forestry technicians. And then I'm currently in an 0401, which is a biologist, ecologist job series. And that's all transitioning. So going forward, it'll be 0456 from GS3 to GS15.
Wow. So that simplifies it a lot for people interested in looking.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can focus in on that series and find something that aligns with whatever experience they have.
Yep.
And get in the door.
Yeah. And getting in the door is not that complicated. We don't have super high educational requirements, basically a high school diploma and a great attitude and an aptitude to learn new things. A commitment to physical fitness. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like we can start there.
Right.
And we're going to teach you the rest. So
it's pretty cool.
It's pretty
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely noticed, like, I've never been in wildland fire or anything myself, but just being around people who are, there's definitely like a vibe, a culture, I think, of the people who stick with it. Cause like you said, you gotta want to get into it.
Well, and you have a lot of intense shared experiences, right?
Yeah.
So anytime you do that, you do form a certain bond with the people that you're doing that with that you can't simulate elsewhere, except maybe like within your actual immediate family, like the experiences you might have with your brothers and sisters growing up. And there's, so many stories I can't tell anybody because they won't even understand.
Sure.
And that's a powerful thing. And it could be lonely at times because there's, you got to like find your old hotshot friends to like talk about, some fire you're on, because you would just spend all your time trying to explain it to other people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a unique job in that regard. But you meet a lot of great people and it's not easy. It's not an easy job to do. Right. So if you're around people that are doing it and sticking with it and making it past, there's kind of this imaginary line at year 3 where you're sort of in or out, right? You're either like, this is what we're doing because the commitment level is so high, or maybe this isn't for me and I don't like sleeping on the ground and not being completely convinced like when the next meal is going to show up out here, or just being out in that environment.
Yeah.
So when you're around people that have made that commitment and made those sacrifices, it's a pretty special thing. So yeah. We have really good stories if you can get us to tell them.
Maybe someday.
About to say, I could keep I wish we could talk for like 3 hours.
Yeah. And so along those lines, like if somebody's looking for this job in a national park, not every national park has these jobs, right? Or do they? I'm not familiar.
Not every unit. Certainly the larger mid-size to larger parks. So for example, in our region, we have 14 park level fire programs, and those programs either manage one or a group of parks. So, when you talk about a Yellowstone or Mesa Verde or Bandelier, Rocky Mountain, Dinosaur, Zion, all those units have a program, and pretty robust, So sometimes when you get into like a much smaller unit, like we manage fire for the Little Bighorn. So Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, it's about 4 hours east of where we're sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And we provide fire management services for them, but they don't have any firefighters per se, or any equipment. So it's just sort of an administrative responsibility. And so, we manage their fires through agreements and relationships. So the Crow Agency has agreed to come over, put out any fires if we get any out. But most mid-size national parks are going to have especially out west, will have their own program. So
cool.
There's a ton of opportunity, investment. The bipartisan infrastructure law I call it National Fire Plan 2.0. It's essentially the next huge influx of investment in wildland firefighting in America. The Park Service is benefiting greatly from that. So all those programs are kind of on the uptick. It's a great time to get your foot in the door and start a career or advance in your career in fire.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I wish we could talk for like 3 hours. I want to just ask you about fire ecology and behavior and what it's like to like get to know it's just like a fascinating process to me. It's like a chemical reaction happening that has its own life and scale. And like you said, behaves so differently, but we do have to wrap it up. So, do you have a favorite story or memory from your time in Yellowstone or another national park, but just something that,
I've been reflecting on that, recently, and I couldn't come up with, the one thing. And maybe that's because at this point in my career, in my life, I've learned to appreciate like small things,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously we live in a place where we're just kind of surrounded by wonderment, and people have a hard time even relating sometimes to the things we try to describe that happen in our backyard. But for example, literally in my backyard the other day, I went out to chop some wood for our stove and was just enjoying the weekend. And I kind of had a quiet moment, and I stood there and a wolf howled. And it sounded like it was, maybe a mile behind the house. And I thought, it's like noon. That's not typically when I hear wolves howl. Sometimes they come around at night, and I'll hear them when I'm letting the dog out, for the last time in the evening or something. And so I sat there real quiet, and it howled again. And I probably have 100, little stories like that. We're just surrounded by it all the time here. And it's there all the time if you're listening for it, and if you're open to it. And we're just surrounded by wonderment there. So if you got your eyes and your ears open, it's always there. Go enjoy it.
I think that's the perfect way to wrap up. Thanks for coming and talking to us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Fascinating.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, I would like to. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of What We Do. Thanks again to our guest, John Cataldo. If you like what we do, rate and review the show wherever you listen. Every positive review helps new listeners find the show. If you have questions or want to learn more about a particular job, contact us using the form at go.nps.gov/whatwedopodcast. Thanks.
I've been here 14 times since the mid-'80s, and since we started coming in the winter, we never have come in the summer again. We just love it in the winter.
It's magical. It's absolutely magical. Not many people, lots of things to do, wonderful skis, snowshoes, hikes.
I think it's so cool that the colors are different in the summer than in the winter. Like morning glory has much more color in the winter than it does in the summer, to me anyway.
And we had a treat yesterday as two very, very large coyotes walked right by our cabin window and cabin door. We wanted to invite them in for wine, but they seemed to be in a hurry.
It's a spirit, sort of, in the wintertime.
I'm Betsy Heiner, and I'm from Colorado Springs.
I'm Mary Smith from Colorado Springs.
I'm Sherry Kimball from Colorado Springs.
I'm Helen Michaels, and I'm from Port Washington, Wisconsin.
This is Yellowstone National Park. Thanks for listening. So I'm out here in Yellowstone National Park's Lamar Valley. I'm not too far from the Lamar Ranger Station, or what was historically known as the Buffalo Ranch. And I gotta say, this is absolutely my favorite place in the park. It is gorgeous. It's this wide, open valley surrounded by grassy hills, sagebrush, and some high mountains off in the distance. And right now, in midsummer, it is covered in bison. There has to be several hundred animals out here right now. It's just a really impressive sight. So it's the bison rut, or the mating season, and while these animals are out here doing their thing and trying to attract mates, they have some really pretty charismatic behavioral displays. But it's the vocalizations, or these bellows, that are so prevalent this time of year that I think are so cool. So I'm out here to check it out. Oh yeah, here we go. It's a bison jam. They're crossing the road.
From Yellowstone National Park, where it'll be super warm this weekend and may snow a little.
For Yellowstone National Park and the Acoustic Atlas at Montana State University, this is Telemetry. You know, every season in Yellowstone is pretty fantastic, but if you're into listening to the sounds of animals, spring and summer, well, there's just nothing like it. And while most creatures in Yellowstone are busily singing their hearts out this time of year, there's one animal that actually gets a little quieter in the spring and summer.